this article, I'm going to criticize this article for the writing first and then address the problem. The final sentence in the article states the author's point clearly. So while the internet has been generally a wonderful addition to our lives, it has created some problems too. Okay? So mostly good, some bad. Opening sentence. It's hard to argue that Korea's rapid rate of connectivity to the internet can be anything but an asset to the country in the future. Now, what does this sentence mean? It is hard to argue, that is, it is wrong to say, pushing it a little further, that Korea's connectivity is a good thing. In other words, Korea's connectivity is mostly a bad thing. The author got caught in his own words. It is hard to argue that, forgot that, and then made the statement that he really means. So, point, clarity is best, especially in an argumentative or persuasive essay. What you want to do is persuade, so clarity, simplicity, and absolute clarity are necessary. And one must avoid the temptation of these, to use these somewhat obscure but apparently elegant constructions like it is hard to argue that, which in this case confused our author. Okay, our author's point is that mostly internet connectivity is a good thing for Korea. He points out that the government actually, this was a planned, what shall I say, a planned phenomenon by the Korean government to connect Korea. Mostly it's been a good thing, but there are some negative features. One negative feature is the addiction, internet addiction. And it's argued that as many as 11% of teenagers, I think, are showing signs of internet addiction. The most obvious social expression of this, I suppose, is the PC bang. And yes, some people spend all night, I've seen it too. I saw it 3 or 4 years ago when I went sometimes. All night at the PC bang. Addiction to computer games. Now, how widespread is this danger? 10%. That's too much, I admit. But certainly people become addicted to it. Now, I remember an essay that I read and taught in college English 20 years ago and 10 years ago called TV addiction. 20 years ago, TV addiction seemed to some people a significant social phenomenon. Now, let's discuss addiction. Addiction means dependence. Addiction means dependence. That is, I depend on it to feel good, to feel like I'm in my normal, to feel good about being alive. I depend on TV viewing, or I depend on computer games or PC bang activities or internet. This dependency is what constitutes addiction. And certainly it's possible to be addicted, and there are people who are addicted. Now, what creates this dependency? Probably negative feelings about other aspects of my life. That is, I seek shelter in TV absorption. I seek shelter in computer activity from other aspects of my life. I don't feel good about school. I don't feel good about friendships. I don't feel good about the future. I don't feel good about normal activities. I also don't even feel good about drinking or something like that, though, of course, alcohol is yet another addiction, a dependency when one doesn't feel good about other aspects of one's life. The addict has to recognize this about himself. This is where alcohol addiction begins, that is, in the open, frank, candid acknowledgement that one is an alcoholic. That's hard to do without evasions. And other forms of addiction operate in exactly the same way. One feels safe in one's dependency upon whatever this thing is, alcohol or TV or internet or whatever. Now, other negative aspects about this connectivity, good word, pornography, sure, even child pornography is mentioned, and then a suicide website, and then a weapons website. These are negative features of this connectivity. I think mostly people overreact when some 13-year-old jumps off a balcony and kills himself because he consulted the suicide website. Of course, what we're into here is freedom of speech, freedom of the press, because the freedom to set up websites for almost anything, these freedoms are covered by freedom of the press. And when governments intervene and prevent things like this, the world becomes a little more less dangerous or more dangerous. Well, this is the real debate. This is the real debate. The real debate is about freedom. The real debate is about government control or freedom. Generally, American society has chosen freedom. American society, here I'm digressing, but I'm not, because I think this is the heart of the issue. The American experiment, because that's what America is, an experiment. The American experiment has decided that freedom is better than control. And I think rightly has decided that we should control only in very serious situations. And we often violate this principle. Like 100 years ago, a little less, 90 years ago, we decided that alcohol was a bad thing, and so we passed an amendment to our Constitution outlawing alcohol. That was reversed within 15 years, and everyone admits that the whole thing was a failure. Freedom to drink is better than governments preventing people from drinking. On other issues, government has stepped in, and rightfully so. Most people agree. For example, child pornography, intolerable. But governments must intervene very cautiously. Very often, government intervention produces more harm than the wrong itself. And freedom is such an important principle. The evolution of Korean society during my 12 and a half years here has been a fascinating thing, because I've watched the liberalization, westernization and liberalization of your culture. That's what has happened. That is what is still happening in Korea. And the connectivity is simply another manifestation of that general principle. Your society has recognized or has joined this experiment, I would say, the underlying principle of which is that freedom is better than control. Largely, it goes back. The reason for that largely goes back to that Latin saying that I used an hour ago: "Quis custodiet custodes?" Who will watch over the so-called police? When you start policing the net, who's going to watch the police who police the net? Who will assure that control is not a worse evil than that which we want controlled? That's the reason why, and I think most of the world agrees with this now. More and more, the world agrees with this. Police intervention and monitoring must be exercised. A lot of caution must be exercised in this. The history of the world is oppressive governments, religious and secular, who do much more harm than freedom does, and the voting of people for governments. Anyway, I think that's true, and I think most people agree, and I think most Koreans agree too. Thank you.